I don't really like Pokemon.
How dare you say something negative about the Pokemon franchise? How dare you?
I think that went pretty well, all things considered. I have nothing against the Pokemon franchise. I just never really got into it. I was just young enough to miss the initial Pokemon craze, and I didn't play any of the games during my childhood. I ended up playing a couple of the games, and I realized that outside of a main gimmick and some new Pokemon, there wasn't really much different between the mainline games. The challenge had been completed, and there was nothing really to draw me back. Until now. Within recent years, I've learned about Pokemon Nuzlocks, pretty much all thanks to Alpharad. If you don't know what a Nuzlocke is, it's essentially playing Pokemon on hardcore mode. You can only catch one Pokemon per route/area, and if a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever and out of the game. And if you have a full team wipe, the run is over. I decided it was time to challenge my skills as a gamer and take on a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Fire Red. Now, you have to remember, I am going off of some extremely limited knowledge here. I don't even know all of the typings that are strong and weak against others. I haven't played a Pokemon game in 8 years, and I don't remember much of anything outside of the main game loop. Because of this, I'm giving myself one small advantage. I'm allowing my Pokemon to be up to 2 levels higher than each gym leader's Pokemon, but no higher. This doesn't feel like an unfair advantage to me, but just enough of a handicap for a little Pokemon noob like myself. I guess there's really no other option but to get started. Subscribe for more of my suffering. My run started off to an immediate problem, with my gamer tag being just a letter too long to fit into the name slot. So I had to make a sacrifice. I was no longer Thalnose. I was just Nose. My rival Poopy was created next, and it was off to the races. I selected Squirtle for my starter simply because I like Squirtle, and named him Jim Bob. Time to get through this first little rival battle to really start the game, and Jim Bob died in the first rival battle.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
After restarting the run and selecting my starter again, this time my Squirtle was female, so I had to come up with a new name. My originality is off the charts. Jane Bob was much tougher than her dead sibling and finished my first rival battle with ease. From here, things were simple for a while. Gather Professor Oak's package, get my Pokeballs and map, and add some new members to my team on my way to Pewter City. I captured Gary the Rattata, Eduardo the Spearow, Chuck the Caterpie, and Carl the Pidgey. But now my team faced its first major challenge. Bug Catcher Sammy. Yeah, really. Jane Bob had already taken some damage in a previous fight with another bug catcher, so it was off to a less than stellar start. Jane Bob was also the only Pokemon I had even close to the same level as Sammy's level 9 Weedle. Jane Bob ended up getting poisoned. Things were not looking good. Thankfully, I had an antidote on me and cured Jane Bob, but she was still low and I couldn't risk the possibility of losing my starter this early into the run. I swapped out to Carl, who was able to finish the fight, but not without consequences. Carl had also been poisoned, and I only had one antidote on me. I raced towards Pewter City, my eyes locked with Carl's, telling him to hold on just a little longer. It was the first loss. Carl, you will be missed. Sorrow quickly turned to anger. I was going to beat this gym. For Carl. Brock felt Jane Bob's wrath right from the gate. It turns out I selected the right starter, at least for this first gym. With this being the rock-type gym, Jane Bob was able to one-shot every last one of her opponents. Outside of that time, I accidentally clicked on Tackle. With the first gym out of the way and vengeance for Carl sufficiently achieved, it was time to head to Cerulean City, where I would collect my second badge. On the way there, I picked up a new Pokemon to fill in that empty void on my team, and Pinocchio the Nidoran joined the squad. Jane Bob continued to wipe the floor with any battles that came our way, and soon we were inside Mount Moon. I caught Mort the Zubat here and continued on my way to the next gym, where I was feeling pretty confident about taking on Misty. My confidence was not entirely well-founded. While most of the fight went pretty smooth, things took a turn when Starmie attacked. His attacks led my Pokemon to getting confused, ultimately making me make the switch out to Mort. Mort also happened to get confused, but unlike the others, he couldn't pull out of the battle in time. As if in slow motion, I watched as Mort took his own life in his fragile mental state. It was a tragedy. Not just a second loss, but a heartbreaking one. I finally finished off Starmie, and we acquired the second gym badge. After a moment of silence for our fallen friend, it was time to move on to the third badge. The third badge wasn't as simple to get to as the first two. We needed to get the cut ability from the captain of the SS Anne just outside of Vermilion City. But before I could do that, I needed to get a ticket onto the ship as well. I had to go get the SS Anne ticket from a guy named Bill, so that was the first stop. On the way to Bill's, I swept yet another rival battle, and picked up a new Pokemon to replace the hole that Mort left. It ended up being another Caterpie, which I named Bill. Until writing this, I honestly didn't realize I named him the same thing as the NPC I was heading toward. I don't think I even knew the name of the NPC at this point, but just knew that that was where I needed to go. Or maybe I did and the name Bill was just floating around in my subconscious. Either way, we have Bill now. Soon, I found my way to Bill's house. Not my Bill, the NPC Bill. And he was up to some weird stuff. I helped him out with his predicament, grabbed the ticket, and got out of there as quick as I could, scrubbing everything I had just witnessed from my brain so I never had to think of it again. Soon, I found myself boarding the SS Anne, and I quickly raced up to the captain's quarters to get the cut ability. There was yet another rival battle with Poopy just before this, and this one didn't go quite as easily as the previous ones. Thankfully, no losses occurred, but Eduardo had too close of a call when he got knocked to 1 HP by a Hyper Fang attack. He clung on, and we got through the battle without having to say goodbye to any more Pokemon. I grabbed Cut and taught it to Pinocchio, then quickly headed back over to the Vermilion City Gym to claim my next badge. After completing what must be one of the worst puzzles I've ever played, I finally got the right to challenge Lieutenant Surge, the leader of the Electric Gym. I threw out Gary to start things off, and it was going great. He smashed through Voltorb and Pikachu with ease using Hyper Fang, and it felt like this gym was going to be a walk in the park. Then Raichu showed up. Gary got paralyzed by a Thunder Wave, and just couldn't break through the paralysis. In my abundant wisdom, I hadn't purchased any para heals, so my easy option was gone. I switched out to Pinocchio, but the same fate befell him. He was losing health quickly, so I switched out to Chuck. Remember when I said I didn't know all of the typing's effectiveness? Yeah, this is where that failed me. Chuck was burnt to a crisp with another Thunder Wave, and suddenly this gym was getting a little scary. My starter was weak to electric, I did know that much, and 2 more of my Pokemon were already getting low. I took a risk and threw out Pinocchio again, knowing I had some heals and hoping I could get an attack off to end this. After several cycles of healing Pinocchio and missing attacks, he finally landed a successful Horn attack and finished off the Raichu, earning us the 3rd gym badge in the run. At this point, I wasn't sure how I was feeling about this run. Overall, I was still feeling mostly confident. I had some slip-ups, but they were all learning curves. If I could just play smart from here on out, I could really turn the tides. For now though, it was time to do some more work to get to the 4th gym badge. I headed out to Diglett's cave, which I needed to get through so I could obtain Flash. On my way through the cave, I caught Annabeth the Diglett and continued the rest of the way through. I got Flash and taught it to Bill so he could light our way in the rock tunnel. Speaking of the rock tunnel, here we are. I used Flash to light things up and quickly got to catching a Geodude that I named Geodudette. Yes, my naming conventions are truly outstanding. I sent Geodudette to the PC since my team was currently full and continued on through the tunnel. And after way too many fights, I finally was able to make my way through the tunnel and into the Celadon City Gym. This gym was a cakewalk compared to the last two, with Eduardo pecking everything in his path. Erica gave us the 4th gym badge, and we were officially halfway through the gyms. Things were looking pretty good. Now it was time for the Team Rocket hideout. Individual grunt fights were definitely more difficult at this point, but I was still able to race through the hideout with little issue. That was until I had to face Boss Giovanni. Jane Bob was at about half health before this fight, and I stupidly decided not to heal her and simply lead with Pinocchio instead. Pinocchio ended up being the unfortunate recipient of a Mega Punch from Giovanni's Kangaskhan, and it was lights out for our Nidoran. Eduardo finished out the end of the fight, and we solemnly gathered the Sylph Scope, still mourning the loss of a teammate that had been through so much with us. But we didn't have much time to mourn, and it was time to head to Pokemon Tower. I picked up Geodude from the PC and went inside the tower looming before me. After beating up Poopy's Pokemon another time, I continued climbing the tower and caught a Ghastly, which I named Batman for some reason.
I'm Batman.
Jane Bob finally evolved into Blastoise here, and I finished my journey in the tower and recovered the Pokeflute. Now that I had the flute, it was time to add some more muscle to my team. I went and found Snorlax on Route 16 and woke him up. I checked online to make sure that strategy was okay for a Nuzlocke, and it seemed that there was no issue as long as Snorlax is the first Pokemon to be encountered on that route, just like the rule for any other route. Because this was the case, I woke him up, caught him, and named him Barry, and switched Geodude out yet again so Barry was on the team. At this point, I was ready to head over to Silphco. I gave the guard his tea, and he let me on through so I could reach the next leg of my mission. Silphco proved to be more challenging than other locations, but I was still making it through okay. I grabbed the card key, and just when I thought everything was going relatively smooth, Scientist Bo had other plans. His Magnemite ended up confusing Bill, and the trauma of Mort's death was brought right back to the surface. It couldn't happen again, not like this. This is a Pokemon game. This isn't even supposed to be so dark and gritty and... Bill suffered the same fate as Mort. His mental state so scrambled that he made the final decision and ended his existence. After getting through the fight, I raced back to the Pokemon Center, death on my mind, my thoughts racing over losing yet another member of my team. I pulled out Geodude from the PC once again and went back to Silphco, ready to face the demons that lurked there. I had the key card still. Now it was time for another rival battle with Poopy. This one was immediately more concerning than the last. Poopy started out with his level 37 Pidgeot, which was only 2 levels lower than Jane Bob. Typically, this wouldn't be seen as a bad sign, but I had one major oversight. My other Pokemon weren't all leveled up. Eduardo was level 35, and below him, none of the others were above level 32. This wasn't good, and there was no running from this fight. I could feel the icy chill of Death's fingers clawing at my shoulders. I may not make it out of this one. I brought out Barry, knowing even being underleveled, he could still pack a punch. It was a grueling fight. Barry would heal with sleep, Poopy would heal the Pidgeot, back and forth we went. It was starting to look hopeful. The Pidgeot was in the red and only needed one more hit. This stupid strategy was really going to work. Looking at Barry's lifeless body, I knew it was over. Death's hands were now my own, holding the lifeless Snorlax in front of me. Eduardo was next, poor Jane Bob after that, then Annabeth, and Gary. Finally, there was poor little Geodude, who never even got a time out in the sun. I watched as my scythe struck through her, pulling the soul from her now crumbling body. All of our friends that had been through everything with us, gone in mere seconds. It was all over. Death had won. My guiding hand leading them all to the slaughter. I had failed. Well, that got dark. I learned a lot from this experience. I learned I'm terrible at Pokemon, and I've learned that I may have assumed a Nuzlocke was a little easier than I once thought, and I have a lot more respect for the players that have the knowledge and know how to pull one of these off. This was a fun little experiment and challenge for myself, and who knows, maybe I'll give it another shot sometime. It definitely did make Pokemon more fun, and something that I felt like I actually hadn't done before. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world if you liked and subscribed. We're over halfway to 1,000 subs now, so you have a chance to help this channel reach that first massive milestone. Support is always appreciated. Until next time, go boop a snoot. And I still don't like Pokemon.